Level 1, the filing. You sign your name on page 11 of a document that ends everything you thought you were building. The attorney's office smells like carpet cleaner and old coffee. He tells you where to sign 3 more times, each signature smaller than the last, like your hand is trying to disappear from the paper before your name fully lands on it. Chapter 7. The words sound clinical, almost administrative, like a tax form. They are not administrative. They are the sound of a door closing on every credit card, every collection call, every 2 a.m. spreadsheet you ran trying to make the math work that never worked. You are 31 years old. You owe $94,000 across 6 creditors. In 14 minutes, you will owe nothing, and you will also own nothing, because the two are the same transaction. The attorney explains it the way he's explained it 1,000 times before. Chapter 7 is liquidation. A trustee is appointed to your case, and in exchange for discharging your qualifying debts, most unsecured, most consumer credit cards, medical bills, personal loans, you agree to give up any assets that fall outside your state's exemptions. Every state protects something. A car up to a certain value, a portion of home equity, retirement accounts almost everywhere, tools of your trade if you're a tradesperson. You don't qualify automatically. First, there's a means test, a formula comparing your income against your state's median for a household, your size, built specifically to keep people who can actually repay their debts in Chapter 13 instead. You passed it easily. Passing it doesn't feel like passing anything. In 6 weeks, you'll sit in a room with a trustee and answer questions, under oath about every dollar you've moved in the last year. A hearing called the 341 meeting, named after the section of the Bankruptcy Code that requires it, usually over in 10 minutes, usually anticlimactic, the paperwork having already done the real work of deciding your fate. He explains all of it. You nod. You don't really hear it. You're thinking about the car outside, a 2011 Corolla with 140,000 miles, the one asset your state's exemption lets you keep, which means the law has decided your car is worth less than your dignity, and it did the math faster than you did. You drive home. You don't cry. You expected to cry. Instead, you feel something closer to static, a low hum where panic used to live. The panic used to have a job. It used to remind you to check the mail before your roommate did, to let the calls from unknown numbers go to voicemail, to lie awake running numbers that never resolved. Tonight, the panic has nothing to check. Tonight, there is nothing left to lose track of. You sit in your car in the driveway for 11 minutes before going inside. The first rule: the bottom isn't the moment you run out of money. It's the moment you stop having to protect it. Level 2, the empty account, 340. This is what remains. Not debt, not credit, not fear of debt. Just $340 and a checking account that finally, for the first time in 3 years, only has one number in it instead of a number and everything owed against it. You get a part-time job at a hardware store making $14 an hour, 26 hours a week, because full-time would change your income bracket for the year and your attorney told you to keep things simple while the case finalizes. You count nails into little paper bags for customers who don't look at your face. You clock out at 3 p.m. and drive to a second job stocking shelves at a grocery store from 4 to 9. You eat dinner, standing at the counter because sitting down to eat feels like a decision you haven't earned yet. Your rent is $625 for a studio above a laundromat. The dryers run until 10 p.m., and the whole apartment hums faintly. A mechanical heartbeat that isn't yours but that you've started sleeping to anyway. You open a secured credit card, the standard first move after a bankruptcy discharge. You put down $200 of your own money as collateral, and the bank extends you a $200 credit line against it, the card functioning less like credit and more like a supervised trial. The interest rate is 26%, which doesn't matter yet because the entire plan is to never carry a balance, only to use it for something small and recurring. Gas, a subscription, and pay it off completely before the statement closes. This is how credit bureaus start trusting you again. Not through income, not through savings, but through a simple repeating signal. Opens a line, uses a little of it, pays it back on time, every month, without exception. Your credit score, which sat around 480 the week of the filing, a number low enough that most lenders won't touch you, starts moving because of that signal alone. You are not managing money at this level. You are auditioning for the right to be trusted with it again, and the audience doesn't clap, they just watch the score. The second rule: rebuilding doesn't start with a plan. It starts with a bank deciding whether you're allowed to have one. Level 3, $3,000, 11 months in. You've paid the secured card on time every single cycle. In full, a discipline that has nothing to do with the $19 balance and everything to do with the number the bank sees behind it. Payment history is the single largest factor in your credit score. Roughly 35% of the calculation, more than your total debt, more than the length of your credit history, more than anything else combined. Your score, 480 at the filing, is 561 now. You check it the way you used to check the debt. Except now the number moving up feels like something instead of nothing. You've picked up a third income stream, not a job, a skill. You learned basic bookkeeping on YouTube, during the slow hours at the hardware store. Double entry logic, how a balance sheet has to balance, the difference between cash and accrual, and a woman who owns the flower. Shop 2 doors down, asks if you'll reconcile her books for $200 a month. You say yes before you've fully worked out if you can do it. You figure it out in a library on your one day off. A library card and a stack of borrowed textbooks replacing the tutoring you can't afford. The $3,000 sits in a savings account that pays almost nothing in interest, and you don't touch it. Not because you don't need things, you need almost everything, but because $3,000 is the first number in 3 years that represents distance instead of debt. Financial planners call this a starter emergency fund, usually 1 month of bare expenses, built before anything else, because a single unplanned $400 expense is what sends most people who've never filed for bankruptcy into the same spiral you're climbing out of. You measure that distance daily. Your best friend from college texts asking if you want to split a weekend trip to the coast. $180 for your share. You say you're busy that weekend. You are not busy that weekend. You are protecting $180 the way other people protect their retirement. The third rule, the first $3,000 after bankruptcy isn't savings. It's proof you can be trusted with your own hands again. Level 4, $12,000. The unsecured card arrives. 2 years post-filing, a bank you've never had a relationship with sends an offer. Actual unsecured credit, a $2,500 limit, no collateral required. You stare at the envelope longer than the offer deserves. This is the first door that opened without you having to hand over your own money to unlock it. You take it. You use it for gas once a month and pay it off before the statement even generates. A habit so rigid it stops feeling like discipline and starts feeling like breathing. Your credit score crosses 650, solidly into what most lenders classify as fair to good, the range where car loans and modest mortgages start becoming realistic instead of theoretical. 2 years is also a meaningful marker for another reason. It's roughly the point where many lenders stop weighing a discharged bankruptcy as heavily in manual underwriting, even though the Chapter 7 itself will stay on. Your credit report for up to 10 years from the filing date. The mark doesn't disappear. Its influence just quietly shrinks the longer your record afterward stays clean. The bookkeeping side work has grown into 4 small clients. $100 a month, enough that you drop the grocery store job and keep the hardware store for the health insurance alone. You move into a 1-bedroom, actual door between you and the kitchen. $890 a month, a $265 increase from the studio that you calculated for 6 weeks before signing the lease. Keeping housing under 30% of your take-home pay, the rough ceiling most budgeting frameworks recommend. Your mother calls and asks carefully, the way she's asked every few months since the filing, if you're doing okay. You say yes, and for the first time since the attorney's office, it's mostly true. You open a Roth IRA with $40, a retirement account funded with after-tax money that then grows and can be withdrawn tax-free in retirement, one of the only accounts your state's exemption law would have protected. Even during the bankruptcy itself, you didn't have anything to protect back then. You do now. The 4th rule, credit doesn't come back when you deserve it. It comes back when the system quietly decides you're worth the risk of trusting again. Level 5, $35,000, the reversal. 3 years and 4 months out. The number that once represented debt is now the shape of what you've built. And the reversal of that math sits somewhere in your chest most mornings, a small persistent disbelief. Your bookkeeping side business has a name now, and 11 clients, and $4,200 a month in revenue against maybe $600 in expenses, and you've started wondering quietly, in the way you wonder about things you're not ready to say out loud, whether it could become the whole thing instead of the side of it. You still work the hardware store 2 days a week, not because you need the money anymore. Not really, but because leaving still feels like a door you're not sure closes as easily as it opens. Your credit score is 712, solidly good, a number 18 months ago that would have sounded like fiction. You get pre-approved for a car loan, not because you need a new car, the Corolla still runs, but because you want to see the offer arrive with your name on it. The same way you once wanted to see if the secured card would say yes. It says yes, 6.2% APR, a rate that would have been unthinkable at the 480 you started at, where subprime lenders routinely charge 15 to 20% for the same loan. You don't take it, you just needed to see it. Your $35,000 lives across 3 places, an emergency fund at $9,000, 3 months of full expenses instead of the 1 month you started with, the Roth IRA at $6,000, and a taxable brokerage account you opened 4 months ago holding the rest. Index funds, the boring kind, funds that simply track a broad market instead of trying to beat it. The kind you read about during your library hours back at level 3. You don't tell your friends the number. You tell exactly one person, the flower shop owner, your first client, because she was there for the $200 a month version of you and deserves to see what it became. The 5th rule, the number doesn't heal what happened, but it changes what happens next. And eventually that's the same thing. Level 6, $90,000 the business. 5 years out. You quit the hardware store on a Tuesday that felt smaller than it should have. Your bookkeeping practice, now with a real name, a real website, 22 retained clients, clears $6,800 a month after expenses. You hire your first contractor, a woman named Priya who does exactly what you did 4 years ago, quietly reconciling books during hours she'd otherwise spend somewhere else. You pay her $28 an hour, more than you made at your worst job by a factor of 2, and something in you settles when you run that payroll for the first time, a debt repaid to no one in particular. Your net worth crosses $90,000, split across the emergency fund, the retirement accounts, the brokerage, and for the first time, equity, because you bought the 1-bedrooms, building's twin unit down the hall as a rental, financed with a mortgage, a bank approved without blinking, a bank that 4 years ago wouldn't have extended you a department store card. Underwriters look at 4 things above almost everything else: credit score, debt-to-income ratio, employment history, and down payment. 3 years earlier, you had none of the 4 in any usable shape. Now you had all 4. The tenant pays $150 a month. Your mortgage, taxes, and insurance run $740. The math nets $310 before maintenance and vacancy. Reserves small, unglamorous, real. The kind of return real estate investors call cash flow rather than appreciation. Money that shows up whether or not the property's value ever changes. You still drive the Corolla. It has 190,000 miles on it now, and you've started to think of it less as a car and more as a witness. The one thing that was in the driveway. The night you sat there for 11 minutes not crying, you don't sell it. Your accountant, an actual accountant now, not you doing it yourself in a library, tells you your effective savings rate is 38%. Well above the national average, which studies consistently place in the single digits for most households. The 6th rule, you don't rebuild by replacing what broke. You rebuild by becoming the kind of person who could survive it happening twice and still be fine. Level 7, $240,000 the ceiling lifts. 7 years out. The Chapter 7 has fallen off your credit report entirely. A scheduled expiration you'd circled on a calendar, the way other people circle anniversaries. 10 years from the filing date exactly as the credit bureau's own rules require, and in some private accounting you keep, it is 1. Your credit score is 781. Into the range lenders label exceptional, where the best rates and the most offers exist and where you rarely bother reading them anymore. You get offers now that you don't read twice. You just decline the ones you don't need. A fluency with rejection that took years to earn, because rejecting an offer requires believing you'll get another one. The bookkeeping practice has become an actual firm. 4 contractors, 41 clients, $19,000 a month in revenue, and you've started doing something you couldn't have imagined at level 1, turning clients away. You own 2 rental units now. Net equity of $110,000 between them, plus $130,000 across retirement and brokerage accounts. Your net worth, all in, is $240,000, a number that 7 years ago would have required you to owe negative $94,000 first. A fact you sit with sometimes, the strange arithmetic of it, that the version of you who filed the paperwork was a necessary ancestor of the version who exists now. Not a failure erased, but a foundation poured. You take a trip, an actual vacation, not the coastal weekend you turned down back at level 3. A real one, 9 days, paid for in cash from a travel fund you built on purpose over 11 months. You don't feel guilty spending it. That absence of guilt is its own kind of wealth, one that doesn't show up on any statement. The 7th rule, the ceiling you thought bankruptcy put on your life was never real. It was just the lowest floor you'd stood on, mistaken for the top. Level 8, the return 10 years out. You are 41. You are sitting in the same attorney's office, a different chair, a different reason. Not filing this time, referring. Your cousin sits where you sat. Same carpet cleaner smell, same trusty process explained in the same clinical language, the same means test, the same exemptions. And you are there because she asked you to be, because you are, apparently, the person in the family who survived this and came back with proof it doesn't end the story. You don't say much in the meeting. Afterward, in the parking lot, she asks how long it took, really. Not the version people say to sound inspiring, the real number. You tell her the truth. 3 years before it stopped feeling like an emergency. 7 before it stopped feeling like a scar. 10 before you stopped needing to check. Your net worth crosses $680,000 that same month. A fact you don't mention to her. Not out of secrecy, but because the number was never the part worth explaining. You've started running your own numbers forward for the first time. Not backward, the way you spent a decade doing. At a 4% annual withdrawal rate, the rough rule researchers use to estimate how much a portfolio can sustainably provide each year without running out. $680,000 could already generate a little over $27,000 a year on its own, without touching the firm, the rentals, or a single client invoice. That number isn't retirement. It's the first time the math has ever pointed toward more room instead of less. The firm has 9 people now. The 2 rental units became 4. The Corolla finally died at $240,000 miles, and you replaced it with something modest, paid in cash. A decision that took 4 minutes because the money was simply there and the fear that used to attach itself to every purchase had. At some point you can't quite date, stopped showing up. You still remember the 11 minutes in the driveway. You don't flinch remembering them anymore. They don't feel like the bottom now. They feel like the first honest number you'd let yourself see in 3 years. And honesty, it turns out, was the only opening balance that ever mattered. Somewhere tonight, someone is signing page 11 of a document that feels like the end of everything. It isn't the end. It's the only kind of beginning that tells the truth before it lets you build anything real on top of it. The 8th rule, you don't rebuild a life by pretending the bottom didn't happen. You rebuild it by becoming someone the bottom couldn't keep.